For me, a lot of it is a process of trying to recognize a lot of these things in myself and things that I do that I wasn't aware of.
You can think about like all the sort of internal feelings you have, like prejudice, right? But all the time you're probably interacting in ways that they can externalize in terms of who you choose to be friends with, how you talk about other people, what you decide to vote for.
I'm responding to a difference in somebody else that I also experience, and ultimately then treating somebody maybe as I wouldn't want to be treated.
The thing that I decided to explore was the subprime mortgage scam that went on a few years ago. And so I just decided to try to apply what I'd been reading about, what I've been learning to the cycle of oppression. And so I just created this character, sort of a generic, he works at the Friendly Predator Bank and Loan, and so he's just a loan agent. And so he says, starting with fear of difference, you know, black people have different skin color and social spheres. I don't understand what it's like to be black. I don't live near black people. I'm afraid of black neighborhoods, and I'm in charge of giving home and business loans.
Some students or people who grow up in privileged classes tend to be in a bubble. If your only exposure to people of color is through those negative lenses, then you're going to be afraid of those groups, and so then you start to create stereotypes based on the things that you see and that you hear.
I've experienced that on both ends. Like, I think I'm as guilty as anybody else. I have some preconceived notions about things that make me do things, and then I'll walk away and go, boy, that was crappy of me. Like, I have nothing to base that on, like, except a bunch of hang-ups that society has given me. I've also had the experience where, depending on my context, because I am a Latino male, or because I look Middle Eastern and I'm not, that I get watched.
So then moving on to the stereotype. So he says, in the media, I see black people often live in poverty with less access to education. The media tells me black people can also be violent and on drugs. Since I do not spend time with black people, I do not have my own experience to draw from.
Usually as a black person, I try not to overstate feeling watched when I'm in a store, but like it's pretty obvious sometimes where someone's just paying attention to you and like looking at you like you're gonna do something. I said, oh, I need a cash back, and the lady says, oh, sorry. And so I had to go through the line again, just buying something small like $2, which they charge me more money for anyway because I'm using a card. I get the cash back, and then the whole time like the security guard's looking at me like kind of funny. There's definitely this level of kind of suspicion around black people and a lot of people who experience crime.
One of the ways in which I was socialized was a lot of people would think that I would be good at math, that I would be quiet. You know, there were these sort of stereotypes, these generalizations about what Asians were like as a group.
Then the next part here, thinking about prejudice. So here he is thinking about the stereotypes he's learned. I think that a black person is less likely to be able to pay back a loan because they are less likely to get a good jobs and move out of poverty. My social and professional circles do not tell me otherwise.
Being a Latino male, a group that has historically been seen as not as strong academically, I've always had to fight against the notion that I wouldn't be a good student. If I did well on assignments, the comments I would get from college professors were comments like, wow, you write really well for a Latino.
I reached a point in sort of my younger adulthood when I realized I wanted to be a teacher, and one of the first thoughts I had was, oh, I can't teach here. And so, I mean, I couldn't teach where I was from and actually live the kind of life I wanted to live.
One of the earliest things I remember was getting on a bus with my mom, and I sat next to an elderly white woman, and she looked at me and got up and walked away. She wouldn't, I mean, she was frail, but she'd rather stand than sit next to me.
And then here, the discrimination, my manager and some of my colleagues tell me that black clients are higher risk. So here, actual discrimination building.
We were sitting in it was chemistry class. I don't know, maybe I was in 10th grade or something. And I remember the teacher, Dr. Wells, she wanted to determine from the class when we wanted to take our tests. So, is it going to be on Tuesday or is it going to be on Wednesday? We get to vote, you know, democracy, right? And then Dr. Wells, she doesn't know what to do because she said, oh, well, it's a tie. You know, we'll just have to figure something out. And then this guy named Nick, he said, so actually, my day one that I voted for, because, this is Nick talking, because Alan only counts as 3/5 of a person, and I was the only black person in the class. And if you know American history, he was referring to the 3/5 compromise, where black people only counted as 3/5 of a person. And so, he says it in class, as a joke. But it felt really embarrassing, it felt really, really bad.
And the reality of the matter is that they don't know anything about me. And I used to call people out on that, and they'd go, oh, but then they go and do it to somebody else. So now I kind of just don't fight that battle anymore.
Every year there would be this carnival. My friend and I would walk over. We're, you know, both Dominicans. There was a group of Italian kids that started throwing pebbles at us and calling us niggers. And, you know, you try to walk with your head up high, but it was frightening.
Institutional impression. Here, you know, someone signing this ridiculous rate loan, super high interest rates. My institution creates a culture of fear around high-risk clients. They are charged a much higher rate if loans are given at all.
If we were to think about the cycle of oppression, I think the piece that I'm always most focused on is institutional oppression, because I feel like in some ways, if there's such a thing as like a base or an anchor to a cycle, like that would be it.
When the structures of a larger institution, a school, anything from I guess a school to a business to a country, are set up structurally to prioritize certain members of that group, certain citizens or individuals, because of core identifiers over which they have no control.
Sort of a lot of the opportunities I've had have come through schooling that I received by no virtue of my own and simply because of sort of the socioeconomic status in which I was born, my skin color, my gender, which opened so many more doors and opportunities, gave me the opportunity to make sort of mistakes along the way and to have those mistakes not be sort of definitive of what outcome ended up happening.
I'm Latina. I grew up in an inner city close by, and I still live there. I live in Richmond. But I have tattoos. One on this side, and one on this side. I have some on my back. And I've had people just randomly come to me and ask me at conferences when I decided to turn my life around, because I must have been in a gang at some point in my life. And when did I decide that, you know, I wanted to be an educator? And I always have to kind of explain, yeah, I've never been in a gang. Yes, I did grow up in a rough place. I grew up around a lot of people who were in gangs. I've had friends who were in gangs, but I never affiliated with a gang.
And then finally, the last of that cycle here, the internalized impression, right? The person saying that loans are presented in a way that hide the extremely high rates and that are costly and difficult to pay back. When the borrower cannot pay the loan back, they feel like they failed. They're also told that they failed and then dropped into a deeper level of poverty as assets are reclaimed and become the property of the oppressor. And so here you can see the house being foreclosed and going back and perpetuating the same cycle.
Internalized oppression is when you are facing discrimination, or maybe you're getting feedback from society, from other people, that that you're different because of the color of your skin, your race, your class, whatever. And eventually you come to think, well, it's not those people who have a problem because they're noticing this or they're pointing it out. It must be actually a defect within myself.
For a long time, I had a really hard time making eye contact with or sort of smiling at other more masculine presenting or butch women that I would see, or people who I assumed identified as women, which of course I might not be right about that, who I would see on the street, I would sort of feel a little bit like maybe I shouldn't say hi, or I didn't get to say hi, or I wasn't able to tap into the sort of feeling of sameness that I felt. I think it's internalized because it's about me, but then it gets spun around and looks like unfriendliness to another member of an identity that I belong to, that can contribute to a sense of isolation ultimately.
It almost changes who you are, or at least who you portray yourself as. Even this year, it's just like my first year as dean, I was terrified for the first 4 months. Of just kind of like, I have to make sure that I do a good job. I have to make sure that I am representing not only myself, but the people who went up to bat for me. And just, you know, really representing my people well, as in my people, as in black people. Like, I have to make sure that everything that I do comes off without a hitch.
I know for a long period of time, I wouldn't wear my hair out or curly at all because I didn't like the way it looked, and that was just a part of me not liking myself. In our society, generally women and women of color don't tend to wear, or did not wear, their hair out because it didn't fit the status quo. So they would always wear their hair straight, but now you see more women wearing natural hair. And for the longest time, I would never wear my hair out, and I was just like, oh no, it's crazy, it's bushy, like people just think that I look a mess. Like, I didn't feel put together. But more so now, I've come to terms with that this is who I am.
The problem with oppression and the problem with inequality, right, is that we are actually all complicit in it because we are all part of the system, you know, in various, you know, varying ways. Like, there's some ways in which, you know, I can talk about myself as being subjected to oppression, but there, of course, there are also ways in which I benefit, you know, from systemic inequality.
I really do think that education, and a good education, is the way that you do this, because I think that fundamental in education is like instilling a sense of empathy, right? That you learn how to be empathetic as a person, and you learn how to recognize humanity in its various forms, right? And all the other stuff like math and science and history, all of those are just disciplines and different ways of thinking about how to do that.